Shana Tova. This year, our theme for the High Holy Days is personal growth. It is one of the themes of these Yamim Noraim, days of awe. We review or take stock of our life, the way we live and the choices we make, and we reflect on these choices, and then we resolve to make certain changes. When we connect the dots between, uh-oh, look what I've done, and I'm going to do that differently this year, that is transformation. This morning, I want to approach this subject with greater humility. I'm going to talk about change and growth, and you and I have just been through a hurricane. So I want to tell you all right now that I am pretty sure you all experienced moments of confusion and clarity, purposefulness and paralysis that caused you to pause, reflect, and change. And hopefully in my words this morning, I will articulate for you a language and structure for this continued growth. One of my favorite Talmudic stories, you may have even heard it before, is about Rabbi Zusia. When Rabbi Zusia was lying on his deathbed, surrounded by his disciples, they asked him, "Our Rabbi, why are you trembling? You taught us that there is no reason to fear death." And Rabbi Zusia responded, "In the world to come, I am not afraid that I will be asked, 'Why were you not like Moses, like Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob?' I am afraid that I will be asked, 'Why were you not like Zusia?'" For Zusia was afraid that maybe he was not the unique person he was supposed to be. Some would say today, fully actualized. When I was in rabbinic school, I had a wonderful professor. He was the original Lenny Kravitz. Yes, that's right, his name was Leonard Kravitz. And he would say to us, "When you become rabbis, always remember to be yourself. Unless, of course, you're a jerk, then be someone else." We are all unique human beings with the potential to fulfill our unique mission in life. As members of a society, communities, and families, we have many aspirations in common. We know we should be caring and compassionate, fair, kind, and loyal. We know we need to do good, to be good. We know we were given a system of mitzvot to refine our character. But we get stuck. Sometimes there are reasons we are stuck in place: an illness, loss, boredom, fear. We may even feel overwhelmed. There's a funny story about a construction worker who would open his lunchbox every single day, look down and groan and say, "Cheese sandwiches again." And one day his coworker said, "Why don't you ask your wife to fix you something else?" And the construction worker replied, "I'm not married, I fix my own lunch." He was stuck in that boredom. This morning, we may be feeling overwhelmed. For only 11 days ago, Irma was pretty overwhelming. Many of you have just gotten your power restored. The village is a mess. School and work have been disrupted. We are all out of sorts, even our pets. And yet, here we are. We are thankful, hopeful, a Temple Beth Am community acknowledging our blessings and joining together to raise our voices to greet the new year. Give yourselves some credit. Let's exhale and inhale and exhale. And if you are envious of your neighbors or friends who had those whole house generators, don't worry, Yom Kippur is in 9 days and you can repent. My Irma journey is probably similar to many of your Irma journeys. We brought my in-laws from Sunny Isles to Pinecrest, and then we were told to evacuate. We went to Tampa, and then to Orlando, and we tried to outrun or second-guess Mother Nature, a lesson in itself. And shortly after we lost power in Orlando, my father-in-law began to share stories with me about his youth, stories that I've never heard before. Now, to give you an indication of my father-in-law's mindset during the hurricane, it may have been different than, well, I know it was different than my mindset. Let me relate to you this phone conversation he had with his friend. For my father-in-law, Chaim, is a Gulag survivor. He called his 93-year-old friend, a Holocaust survivor from Poland, who, by the way, found no reasonable reason to evacuate his high-rise on Miami Beach. So the conversation was in Yiddish. It went something like this. I'll say it in English. Shalom, Srul. Shalom, Chaim. Srul, is there a storm? Yes, there's a storm. Srul, how are you? Good, good. Chaim, how are you? I'm good, Srul. Anything else new? My father-in-law gets off the phone, looks at us and says, Srul says everything is fine, let's go home. I try to be kind and I said, look, Sunny Isles is on lockdown. No one is allowed in. I just spoke to the police. Ugh, what do the police know? You can't drive. You can't get onto the island. But you can walk over the 163rd Street Bridge. But how will you do that with your walker? Ugh, I don't need the walker. That is the kind of logic that many of us had to deal with these last couple of weeks. And if you kept your cool, you did great. But then we got a little serious. And for the first time, I heard about my father-in-law and his family taken from Romania to Western Siberia. Russian soldiers came to the door and said to the family, in 20 minutes, be at the train station. His mother started to scream and cry, while my father-in-law, who was 9 years old at the time, his brother 11, and their father packed up some food and clothing. They got to the train station and they boarded a cattle car with some small windows up at the top. 16 days later, they arrived in Western Siberia in a place that was even less than a village called Salihard. With each story about near death and survival, the cold, the death of his father 2 years after they arrived there, working and living in a kolkhoz, practically a slave, I tried to figure out what kept him going. He told me how he stole and ate sour cream that he was delivering by a horse-drawn wagon. He told me how he snuck into a peasant's house to sleep for the night, and how he literally almost froze to death and fought off sleep to survive. We hear these stories of survivors, and we glean some commonalities. One is, they kept going. They kept moving, trying to figure out their next move, whether it was how to get some food or a new place to hide. Nietzsche wrote, "One who has a why to live can bear almost any how." My father-in-law, Chaim, lives those words, and maybe that's why he believed he could walk over the 163rd Street Bridge back to his condo. Each one of us has our own stories, our own narrative by which we choose to live. And within our stories, we have our own truths. They may be, I'm old, I'm young, I'm silly, I'm smart, I'm stupid, I'm deserving, I'm worthless, I'm wrong, I'm right. We are comfortable in our narratives. We don't want anyone or anything to challenge our truth. But our narratives are challenged all the time. A hurricane comes to town, cancels all of our plans, and makes us physically uncomfortable and emotionally insecure. Our parents won't do what we know is best for them, and neither will our children. We are not appreciated, we are overlooked, we are left out. We are healthy, wealthy, and wise until we are not. There is a vulnerability and fragility to the human condition. Yet we are here on Rosh HaShanah in order to understand and accept this vulnerability and still be grateful. We are here on Rosh HaShanah to hear the shofar blast and to remember that our stories can and should be continually edited by ourselves. So if your story doesn't bring you greater joy or fulfillment, change it. If your story doesn't include loving and lasting relationships, change it. If your story causes others pain or isolation, if your story belittles another human being or group of people, change it. There is a Hasidic saying that goes, "Be the master of your will and the slave to your conscience." Don't ignore the things you know you should change or improve. Rabbi David Wolpe wrote about the elasticity of spiritual New Year resolutions. What's nice about spiritual resolutions is that you can ease into them and not worry that one setback equals failure. I'd like to share with you 5 spiritual resolutions which will make this year a year of personal growth and transformation. Number 1, reframe our Hurricane Irma experience. Instead of how miserable we were, how grateful we are now. Instead of how frustrated you were, see yourself now as resilient. And even though you still may be cleaning and fixing and negotiating, make your Irma story about courage, patience, and cooperation. Number 2, communicate consciously. Our technology breakdown these past 2 weeks should remind us that texting is for short answers. Closeness and intimacy demand face-to-face or ear-to-ear, and yes, even full sentences. I am a big fan of emojis, especially smiley faces with hearts or sunglasses, and I even use my priestly benediction emoji, probably a little too much. Let's save texting for the simple stuff and speaking and listening for the important stuff. Number 3, take your soul seriously. Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote, "Just to be is a blessing, just to live is holy." The feeling deep down inside that is aching for moments of transcendence, or maybe anger because you feel God has abandoned you, these need to be addressed and your soul nourished through prayer, meditation, reflection, and action. Number 4, fortify friendships, renew and refresh relationships. Moses Ibn Ezra wrote, "A friend will prove himself in time of trouble." Be the kind of friend who is ready now, who doesn't need to wait for a test. But when those tests appear, and we know they will, whether they are easy like a phone call to make or a trip to Publix, or require more effort and more of your time, let us rise to that occasion. And number 5, be generous of spirit. Being generous of spirit means that you will see the good in other people and try to find the positive in situations. Temper your judgment with understanding and your criticisms with compassion. Understand that your daily interactions with people can make them feel better or worse. The Talmud states, "Happy is the one who performs a good deed, for they may tip the scales for themselves and the world." We don't need to be someone else. We just need to be better at being ourselves. These are some of the things that Hurricane Irma taught me about who I am and who I want to be. I learned that I lose my cool when I lose my cool air. I learned that Amazon Prime cannot deliver water to all of Miami-Dade County in the same promised 36 hours. I learned that I put too much faith in spaghetti models and not enough faith in my own understanding of what it means to be safe, physically, emotionally, mentally. And I learned that although I want to live a more simple, uncluttered, and minimalist life, I'm not even close. Even the dog is not a minimalist. Irma shined a spotlight on our courage and clarity, as well as on our fears and insecurities. We saw our reality from different perspectives, and now we must pause, reflect, and consider what will we do differently in our lives now that we once again recognize how fragile and how vulnerable we all are, together and as individuals. It's a new year. Last year has blown away, and the new year has hunkered down. In gratitude and in awe, determined and unafraid, we say, we are ready. Ken Yeratzon, may this be God's will for us. Amen.